Okay, guys, I want to talk about why it was the United States who bombed the children's girls' school in Iran in the south of the country. Now, I realize that the American government has not completed its investigation and has not announced an official conclusion. Now, at the same time, I also want it to be acknowledged that the Trump administration seems to not agree with itself as to what has occurred and what can be confirmed at this point. If you were to ask any administration official, they would say at this point that they are still investigating. If you ask Caroline Leavitt, she says they are still investigating. If you ask Pete Hegseth, even when he's standing right next to the president of the United States, who just said that it was probably the Iranians who fired their own Tomahawk that they got from somewhere, who knows where, anywhere, I have no idea where they would have gotten their own Tomahawk. And some people were saying, oh, maybe the Ukrainians gave it to them, not knowing the Ukrainians never had them in the first place. But, you know, he's saying one thing, and then they immediately ask Pete Hegseth, and he says they're still investigating. They don't really know. So everybody in the Trump administration, except for Donald Trump, is essentially saying, we don't know who bombed this children's school. And when Trump is asked, he seems to keep suggesting that it was the Iranians with weapons technology that the Iranians do not have. Trump was directly asked about this conundrum, and he essentially responded that he didn't know anything about the school.
President, you just suggested that Iran somehow got its hands on a Tomahawk and bombed its own elementary school on the first day of the war. But you're the only person in your government saying this. Even your defense secretary wouldn't say that when he was asked, standing over your shoulder on your plane on Saturday. Why are you the only person saying this?
Because I just don't know enough about it. I think it's something that I was told is under investigation. But Tomahawks are used by others, as you know. Numerous other nations have Tomahawks. They buy them from us. But I will certainly, whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report.
Now, when Caroline Leavitt, Trump's press secretary, was asked about the difference between Trump's statements that it was an Iranian Tomahawk missile, which again, that in and of itself is quite baffling. You then had the Caroline Leavitt show essentially saying, oh, come on, that's the president's allowed to say what he wants. He's the president. So Trump's show says, hey, maybe the Iranians bombed themselves with the Tomahawk. You go to Caroline Leavitt and she just says, oh, that's Trump being Trump. You know, Trump says all the, I mean, come on. Trump is allowed to have opinions. Trump is allowed to say, I mean, come on. Trump is free to share his thoughts.
On the Iranian school, why did President Trump say yesterday that Iran may have Tomahawk missiles when there are only 3 other U.S. allies plus the U.S. that have those missiles and therefore could...
Look, again, the President said yesterday he will accept the conclusion of this investigation by the Department of War. I know there's been a lot of speculation in the media about who may be responsible for this. We're not going to get ahead of the Department of War and the conclusion of that investigation. The President has a right to share his opinions with the American public, but he has said he'll accept the conclusion of that investigation. And frankly, we're not going to be harassed by the New York Times, who's been putting out a lot of articles on this, making claims that have just not been verified by the Department of War, to quickly wrap up this investigation because the New York Times is calling on us to do so.
So we can't know what's going on at this stage, but the president is free to share his opinions about what he cannot know at this stage. Quite the dilemma. But the investigation continues, and I'm going to be honest with you guys. I do not believe that the investigation is going to come out until after hostilities have ended or it is leaked. I think the Trump administration probably knows where the evidence is clearly pointing and would rather not the name of Operation Epic Fury, such a, you know, a glorious, it's just a glorious, you know, old like Latin style name. I'm sure our founding fathers would have chosen, and they don't want to sully the good name of it. And so to avoid sullying the good name of the operation by announcing that the United States killed 150 to 160 children and civilians at a school, they would rather probably just wait. Now, this is not the only case that has been made. There has been a lot of citizen investigative journalism, quote unquote, that has been done. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, I saw a bunch of reactions, some of which that was getting boosted by alternative media figures on YouTube, everything from like actual justice warrior on Twitter to just like random Trump accounts. I don't know why he's the only one I'm shouting out. He doesn't even cover foreign policy. He's just one of the names I remembered. It was Sean who shared one of them. That was an image from like 1,000 kilometers away, trying to say that this image showed that it was an Iranian interceptor that did that type of damage. Which, considering the damage done, it's kind of hard to imagine an interceptor was, what did the damage. But that ended up to not be true because, again, it wasn't even in southern Iran. It was in a totally different part of the country. There was others who said that the Iranian government admitted that they did it themselves. That ended up also not being true. But the most recent attempt I've seen from mostly conservative world, MAGA world, where they're trying to say, look, I know our administration said we're the pro-peace guy, and we're now engaging in this war that we can't call a war. But hey, we're engaging in the war for justice, freedom, and the American way, as that one social media post where they put like Deadpool and all the other Marvel heroes, because war is a movie, in their social media account. We're doing good. This is good. This is good what we're doing. And so if they say it's good, but we bombed a school, that makes it a lot harder to sell, doesn't it? So instead of accepting that fact for what it is, we've had a lot of cases like this. And before I make the case as to why I'm pretty sure it was the school, I want to show you again one more case as to why people think it was not the United States. This was the most popular recent post shared around. As you can see, 6.8 million people saw this. This means more people saw this than some people were watching like primetime CNN, primetime Fox, primetime other platforms. This got more attention. Let me just read you Matt Tard. Anyway, let's talk about Matt Tard's thing here. The evidence is clear. This is not a Tomahawk. Iran alleged that an American Tomahawk cruise missile hit a school buried in an IRGC compound in southern Iran, killing 165 people. Analysts of a newly released video tells a different story. Analysis. AI analysis. Now that's the first thing. That's the very first. Beep, beep, beep. Okay. No. I'm not going to accept any AI analysis. Okay. AI cannot look at a blurry photograph like this and tell you exactly what model of missile that is. They can't. Because you can't. Because you can't see anything. Okay? And there have been many occasions where AI has analyzed videos that were fake and auto-generated, and you're having AI check the homework of AI, and they say, oh, sure, that's totally real. That's totally real. Oh, yeah, that's a really real video. And it's happened again and again and again. And that's really dangerous because those claims from artificial intelligence verifying fake videos often created by foreign intelligence services, that's really concerning for the public information space. But no, I'm not going to accept your I'm just sorry. I'll read the rest of it and then I'll respond with my bullet points. But that wasn't in the bullet points. And so I just wanted to quickly divert and say, no, I'm not going to accept your robot nonsense. Get a real intel analyst to look at this. AI analyst confirms that the wings of the munition is questioned, sit about 40 to 45% down in the body of the munition. On a Tomahawk, the wings sit roughly 49 to 50% down the body of the munition. The wing-to-body ratio of the munition in question matches an Iranian KH-55 derived land attack cruise missile. Okay, number one, a KH-55, I'm sorry, I keep saying I won't interrupt, but a KH-55 is Russian, not Iranian. Further, the video shows the munition in a steep dive angle for the final attack phase. This phase places the attack angle at approximately 70%, which is the max attack angle for a Tomahawk. The attack angle does not match the KH-55. People just be saying anything. The angle maxes out at above 55 degrees. So what could have caused this? The wing position alone makes the munition impossible to be a Tomahawk. The angle of attack is at a max of the Tomahawk's capabilities. The typical attack angle for a Tomahawk is much lower than 70 degrees. The typical angle is between 20 to 45 degrees. This is due to the flight pattern of the Tomahawk. They fly at very low horizontally to the ground, often only 500 to 100 meters AGL to avoid detection and interception. In order to achieve that attack angle, the missile would have had to gain altitude several kilometers away. This would leave it vulnerable for interception. This is highly unlikely in our first day of U.S. attacks. So what could have caused this? Simply put, GPS jamming of an Iranian KH-55. the USA and Israel were and continue to actively jam the Iranian airspace. If the KH-55 signal was jammed, this could result in an uncontrollable dive. Think of a GPS jamming more like disorienting the missile. On March 7th, President Trump stated, "No, in my opinion, based on what I've seen, this is done by Iran." Today, I concur with the president. Well, thank you, Matt Tard of the Tard clan. Fantastic banner, by the way. I mean, it looks like he beat up the ISIS guys. So this also means, this is a veteran. This is a U.S. service member. Okay, so there's a few things that I just want to throw out here. Number one, he should probably know better that everything he said about the angles is just not true. Like, the angle is fine on this. It could still be a Tomahawk. Number two, the KH-55 is something that comes from sky. If it's from Iran, it's something that is air launched, and you would have to believe that at this point, that America, an hour after America started its operation, 1 hour after America started its operation, that the Iranians were able to get planes in the air with the KH-55, that they fired the KH-55, and then they did it like 7 times. Because you see this video, which is confirmed video of one of the strikes. This is not the strike that hit the school, but this is one of the strikes that hit around the school, which hit the Iranian base. And here are the different strikes from NPR showing the different locations that were hit by the missile. You would have to believe that they messed 7 times. That a GPS jammer, that's not how GPS jamming works, by the way, jammed them to hit the same location, which just so happened to be right next to an IRGC base, an hour after the operation started, before any official Iranian response had begun, and struck it 7 times. It just doesn't make sense. The 7 strikes doesn't make sense. The timing at 10:45 a.m. doesn't make sense because the Iranian response hadn't started. And everything they say about the KH-55 is just nonsense. Look at this. How do you know this is a KH-55? And he like doubles down later, like, oh, look, there's the propulsion engine that you could see here. And you know what else that could be? That could also be a fin. It could be a fin. It could be a tail fin. You don't see anything here. It could be a tail fin. There are real pictures out there of KH-55s being used. Here is an example of one being used in Ukraine. The Russians claim that this was an interception that hit a school, a hospital, a children's cancer ward in Kiev. This one actually flew over my apartment. This one is a KH-55. You can see the thing under it, but you can see that there is the propellant. You can see the actual, what's propelling it, and you can see the fins on top of it. This would be an example of something you can confirm as a KH-55. You cannot confirm that as a KH-55. You can't. You just can't. So I call nonsense that this blurry photograph is enough to confirm that it's a KH-55. This would be in line, this strike, when it happened, with the first wave of American attacks when they were trying to kill Iranian leadership and try to disable Iran's response capability at the start of the strike campaign. And you want to know what? At the same time that this school was struck, America was confirming that they struck the city that it was in. They confirmed it, and then they released videos and photos of it to the New York Times. This was confirmed by Dan Kane in a press conference. He is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staffs. You can't get any more official than that. You can't get any more official than that. So all the evidence points in one direction. All the evidence points in one direction. Oh, I also want to put out there, now this is something that was said by Not Woofers on Twitter, so I want to give him a shout out to this, but this is a good point. The Iranians have also barely used cruise missiles during this campaign. I think they've used 8. So also the likelihood that it would end up being the missile that again, all of it is stacked against the scenario that man drew out, and the evidence that he says he has, he does not have. So that guy didn't make a good case. But again, Here's why I think it was the United States who did this. Number one, it was done at 10:45 a.m. This is during the same period, during the first wave of strikes, which included on this Iranian city. It was publicly announced by Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staffs, that we were striking this area during this first wave, the same period that the strike on the school occurred. There were 7 strikes on this area. If there's 7 strikes on this area, it's kind of hard to imagine that there was like a missed missile that kind of went. No, it's very clear that the United States was trying to go after it. And you want to know why? Because right there is an Iranian base. And so there's a motive for the United States to go after this. It's not like the United States wanted to bomb an Iranian school for it being an Iranian school for no reason. They bombed it because they were trying to take out the base, and the school was next to it. And Pete Hegseth has been very clear that we're done with woke rules of engagements and all that other nonsense. So who knows the type of targeting decisions that went into the calculation that eventually had a missile falling on the girls' school. All the other angles and points that I've seen thrown out there, oh my God, the footage that I've seen, like, isn't it kind of a coinky dink that they're filming at that point? They're not filming the first strike. They're filming like the 3rd or 4th strike. That's always how these types of things happen. That's war. That's war. The attack angle's too steep. That's a lie. The explosion is too weak. Oh, what if the explosion was dropped? Could be that the munition was defunct. That is a possibility, that it could have had a problem with detonation. There's a bunch of other explanations outside of, oh, it must be a KH-55 or an interceptor that did it instead. It could be that that warhead was not ready to be used, but they didn't know. There have been other examples of Tomahawks and other missiles fired by the United States that failed to detonate. It wouldn't be the first and it wouldn't be the last time. Oh, the Iranians haven't provided any evidence. As of 24 hours ago, they have provided footage online showing that, hey, you know, this is a Tomahawk. Here you go. So slowly, ever so slowly, and of course I wouldn't take the Iranians at their word, but the case is clearly being made against the United States. I don't see how the Iranians could have responded fast enough to be them. It's perfectly in line with the American timeline for a strike operation within the first wave. They have clear motivation to go after this base. And it's part of a 7-missile strike package. So, I mean, everything seems to line up with it being a United States strike. But despite the fact that everything seems to be lined up with that conclusion, they continue to deny it. Why do they deny it? Because it would be absolutely barbaric for the Americans to admit, hey, look, we not to admit, but to do what they did. So they'd rather not admit what they did because that would make them look like barbarians when trying to argue, hey, we need to stop this type of Iranian terrorism. By the way, we just blew up a children's school. But by the way, we need to go after Iranian terrorism. It's going to compromise the operation. It's going to make Congress think more about oversight. If the American presidential-led operation is leading to children's schools being bombed in the first wave of attacks, not in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, where they're losing good targets and they're making but in the very first wave of attacks, we're bombing the school. Maybe this requires the mere basics of oversight. The mere basics of oversight. Either way, we still have CNN to go bring on their Republican attack dog, Scott Jennings, to say we don't know anything because there's an investigation ongoing. And I understand there's an investigation ongoing, but we can make conclusions outside of the bounds of an investigation when the evidence is clear.
This is just tell us what we're doing, because we have 7 soldiers, as Abby corrected me last segment. We have 7 soldiers who've died. We have 160 children who've died. We understand that this is the fog of war. However, we want a level of competence from Pete Hegseth that we're not getting.
I do think that we are
What
going
is
to
incompetent
know.
about this military operation, in your opinion, in your expert opinion?
I don't. First of all, I never served. And let me start by saying
this is incompetent. I want to know what's incompetent.
No. I think Pete Hesketh is incompetent.
Why?
I think
what's happening?
Because he has an inability to tell the truth.
What did he say? What did he say that was false?
Because we know what happened.
No, we don't. They're investigating.
Well, I mean, look,
Wait a minute, no.
Hold on.
I want all of you all to go out on a limb right now and tell me that the United States, even during the fog of war, did not kill those kids. Tell me they didn't.
I don't know. They're investigating it, and I'm willing to abide by the results.
I do think it is fine and important for there to be an investigation. I actually think Major Garrett's last question might have been the most important, which is, if the investigation does find that we are responsible,
would you ever know?
Would you tell us?
Because
I think that's what, to me, when I think about the United States military and how we act on the world stage, that is one of the main things that makes us different.
Also, I just want to throw out there, I'm not the only person to have arrived to this conclusion. I really did wait. I mean, I said almost immediately after it happened that the likelihood was that it was the United States. But I didn't want to jump to any conclusion until more and more evidence was clear. But as more and more evidence came clear, it just became more and more damning for the U.S. government. Here's Trevor Ball. Trevor Ball is a Bellingcat researcher. I've seen a lot of people running out who used to really trash all the Bellingcat researchers now coming out and saying, oh, look at this Bellingcat researcher doing good research. Yeah, a lot of them have been doing good research for a very long time. Either way, you see here a Bellingcat researcher with no interest to lie on behalf of the United States government, making a pretty compelling thread if you wanted some more research after this stream, if you didn't believe what my case was compelling enough or otherwise, where he makes the case as for why it was a U.S. Tomahawk missile hitting the IRGC facility in southern Iran. And during those strikes, one of those missiles went and hit the girls' school, where 168 were killed.